smiles at day one of practice. I'll talk about the mood, the vibes at practice after all of this Ime Udoka mess. And the one thing the Celtics did in day one that will erase all of this Ime Udoka mess, the noise. I will tell you all about it right now on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Be ever ready. Recognize the city of champs. Boston, baby, we do what you can't. Locked on number 18, Tatum and Brown, J-team, step back. We gon' wet that and slay teams. Of course, the Celtics, who else could it be? Screaming like KG with the Larry O.B. Karalis above average, assessing the team status. Best daily pod, no cap, salary matching. Clutch like Bird the DJ, keep John on replay. Prime time, dapping up the truth on the sideline. Raining J's, how it started, raising banners, how we finished. Locked on Celtics pod, home of the winners. B.
Hey there, welcome back to the Locked On Celtics podcast, right here in the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day, and I'm here for you every day with a free, fresh podcast. So subscribe wherever you get your podcast. You can also watch the show on YouTube. I'm John Karalis, former professional basketball player, credentialed beat writer covering the Celtics for Boston Sports Journal, and I am now heading into my 16th season covering the team. I've also written a book called The Boston Celtics All-Time All-Stars. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for making this show part of your daily routine. Today, I am talking about the first practice of the season because it is so critical for this team to get out there and feeling normal. So later on, some of the stuff, a couple of things that I noticed on the first day that may have some bearing on what this team is going to be like. The second segment, the players, in yesterday's podcast, if you missed it, I talked about how important it is, critically important for this team, the players, the leaders, to step up and support Joe Mazzulla. We saw a little bit of that. We heard a little bit about that. And so I'm going to talk about that in the second segment. But first, let's just talk about the vibes, baby. Good vibes. There's a good mood. There are smiles. We didn't see, I think, maybe more than one smile at media day. And we actually saw people in a good mood at practice. Media day there's such a dark cloud over the whole event because of everything that had happened. And it was our first opportunity in the media to go out there and talk to these guys and ask these guys, well, what the hell do you know? What do you know? What's going on here? We're all confused. What do you know? And so that's over. And I think there was this thirst to just get back on the court and start moving forward. You got to start moving on. The NBA, it's a cold type of business. It doesn't matter what happens. The instant something horrible happens, immediately the thought goes to, well, how are you going to make up for this? Right? The Gordon Hayward snapped his leg on the floor, and within like a day, it was, well, who's going to step up? Who's going to get the opportunity in place of Gordon Hayward? Is it going to be Jayson Tatum? At that point was it rookie, second year? Is it going to be Terry Rozier? We're all kind of falling over ourselves to say who's going to make the most of this opportunity. And it's always, geez, we feel bad for the guy who got hurt. I don't know if exactly there's a direct parallel with that with Ime Udoka, but Ime's out, Joe Mazzulla's in, and it's just immediately like, well, all right, we did our couple of bits on Ime, and now goodbye. Now what do we got here? Well, what's in front of me? How are we moving forward? Everything is about moving forward. As I've said multiple times, it's the team that can move forward the best in the NBA that often succeeds. It's that immediate mistake has to be put aside so you can just get to the next thing. It's the criticism that I've had of some players who will make a mistake and dwell on that mistake, and then all of a sudden the next mistake comes along. And because you've got that other one on your mind, then you make another one, and then you make a third, and then you make a fourth. And now you got to sit down because you can't get out of your own way. It's who moves on the most effectively that really tends to survive and do well in the league. And so here are the Celtics in desperate need of moving on quickly from a horrible situation. It's bad enough that you got to make up for the loss of Danilo Gallinari. It's bad enough that you got to make up for almost half a season, maybe half a season without Robert Williams. Now you've got all this other stuff, and it's salacious, scandalous distraction type of stuff. And that's what really makes this worse. And that's why Tuesday's practice was so welcome by the team. You could see it out there. I was joking with Chris Forsberg on the NBC Sports Boston podcast where, these guys would have done anything. Whatever Joe Mazzulla told them to do. Run sprints. Yes. Whatever. Do suicides. Yes. Whatever. What drill do we need to do? What insane basketball thing do we need to do? Anything to keep it basketball. And so we heard from the guys. Al Horford talked about it was so good to be back out there. Grant Williams said it was great. Good moods today. Grant actually can be helpful in this situation because he's the smiley guy. He calls himself the smiley guy. And to go out there and have a little bit of fun, but also that focus. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying, hey, there's a good thing that comes out of this. But there is an element of this forces this team to focus pretty quickly. And that's something that they can lean on to get where they need to be. So this situation and all the distraction, they come in and they really start practice strong. They're focused because they don't want to think about anything else. They're in those drills. They're really hitting everything pretty well. People talked about the precision of the practice, the focus of the practice. And then afterwards, we saw in the media, we saw guys out there doing a half-court shooting contest, which is just a nice, fun end of practice thing. It happens everywhere. Every team does it. And it's just this kind of, just let loose and have some fun. Practice is over. You've been on the floor for 90 minutes or more. You've probably been in the gym for 3-4 hours, considering your lifting and your treatment and all that other stuff. To go out there afterwards, just to set the scene, this is the first time in a long time, couple of years, that we in the media have been able to get down onto the floor and we're fully pre-COVID, back to the scrums, back to being down on the practice floor, interacting with people with the team, all this other stuff. So you get to see everything, and we're all in a scrum. We're waiting. I don't think Joe Mazzulla had spoken yet. We're just sort of waiting, and everybody in the media, we're all caught up in the, oh wow, it's so nice to be down here again. And we're talking to each other, people we haven't seen, people I used to work with. We're all like, oh man, hey, nice to see you. Oh, hey, nice to see you. And then all of a sudden we hear this roar from the floor, like, hey! And it was Luke Kornet hitting a half-court shot. And we turn around, we're like, oh my God, they're doing a half-court thing. Everybody pulls out their phones. Let me record this. I got to record this. And so you get to see Broderick Thomas hit a half-court shot. Al Horford hit a half-court shot. Just a fun, kind of goofy, just normal thing. Normal. That's the focus. I thought it was really funny. Joe Mazzulla has done a really good job of keeping things light, but appropriately light with the media so far. He had that joke where when asked about Brad Stevens praising him and saying he's the guy for the job by far, he joked on media day. I think he had a concussion that day. And then I asked him at the practice on Tuesday, what were you thinking? What was going through your head as you drove in to work. This is your first drive into work as a head coach. What's going through your head? And he says, I drive a minivan. That's probably the first thing that goes through my head, and I'm not changing it. But I park in the same spot. I do what I'm supposed to do. And I think that's part of it. The same thing I'm asking the players to do. I have to do. I have to do my job. I have to take it one day at a time, and I can't skip any steps either. So levity, self-deprecation, make your point. That's classic. Just disarming the media, disarming with a quip about yourself, little self-deprecation. Then you make your point. So far, he has a really good grasp of how to interact with us and to make that point. I think the minivan, and maybe we can call them the minivan Celtics at some point, but the minivan is the metaphor, right? It's, I drive this thing and I'm going to keep driving this thing, and I'm going to keep doing what I do with this team, and we're going to keep doing what we do as a team. I think the minivan is actually maybe the early contender for what encapsulates this team. We'll see what happens. It's only one day of practice, so we'll get a sense moving forward how this can go. But I like the early first entry of minivan Celtics because of this. Just throwing it out there, maybe it'll stick. The players had something to say as well. The players, how practice went for them. Really important element next about how they composed themselves and how they acted. Super important here. First, also important, betonline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs, including football, which is like the hottest thing to bet on. Everybody loves betting on football, college football, pro football. It's all there at BetOnline. You can find all of the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, in-depth articles, and analysis on every single game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. Basketball, once they get started up, which is very soon, is the first preseason game on Sunday. Baseball, which is heading into the playoffs now. MMA, boxing, golf, it's all right there. BetOnline is the easiest and fastest way to check in on all your favorite games and events. So head on over to the website, use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. Please gamble responsibly. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Celtics your first listen every day. Make Locked On NBA your second listen. I've already recorded the Wednesday episode of Locked On NBA with Jake Madison of Locked On Pelicans, talking some Celtics, talking some Pelicans media day, but also getting into Lonzo Ball in Chicago and his upcoming knee surgery and the problems they have there. The Chicago Bulls on the verge of blowing it up, already talking about blowing things up over there. And then the DeAndre Ayton situation in Phoenix is something to watch because that could be very, very disruptive to them. Change the face of the West. So it's all there on the Locked On NBA podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you found this one, you can find Locked On NBA, including YouTube. The guys were back at practice, like I said. And when we say focused was, I think, the general assessment of how that practice went. And the most important thing to me was hearing how vocal guys were. Now, of course, it's possible that the guys made it a point to say, hey, if we tell the media that everything was vocal and great, then they'll eat it up. Well, okay, then put it on a plate. I'm eating it up because that's something that I've been saying over the past couple of days. This is a test of the leadership. Jaylen Brown admitted this is a test of leadership. So day one in practice, we want to see leadership. We want to see this team's leaders step up. They need to take the reins. They need to make sure on the court everything is working as well as possible. They need to make sure that the Ime Udoka stuff is eliminated as an excuse, that Joe Mazzulla has his best chance to succeed so they can move forward and focus on the task at hand, which is winning a championship. This is still a championship contending team. Losing Robert Williams hurts that, no doubt. Losing the coach that took them there last season hurts them, no doubt. There are still 7 guys to start the season that were there in that championship run, in that finals run. You added to that Malcolm Brogdon. So you have already a solid 1 through 8. A solid 1 through 8. So I think this is still a team that can go out there and could, do what is expected of them. They still have the ability to go beat teams, right? The vocal leadership is imperative. And so Marcus Smart, it was funny. So I'll start with Grant Williams, who said, you could tell his presence was there. You can tell in switches and coverages. You saw how loud he was communicating. You knew he was here today. And that's something that as a leader, you love to see, because sometimes leaders can come in and they can take the first day lightly. He came in with great intensity from the jump. Marcus Smart recognizes the situation, and he's stepping up as a leader, a vocal guy. Now, Al Horford, that's what made me laugh, because he said, Marcus, he's always overly vocal, so we don't have to worry about him. But he talked about Jayson Tatum, who has been more vocal, much more vocal as Al Horford. Jaylen has taken steps in that regard, Al Horford said. We're seeing guys grow into these roles, blossom in these roles, and now I think recognize the importance of this role at this time for them. And so for Marcus, just taking that mantle as the vocal leader, and I think he's always had it, but really taking it and saying, we're not gonna come in and coast like other finals teams. It's very easy to say short off season, and maybe if Ime was here and nothing happened, and Rob was here and he was still, let's say he was healthy, maybe things would have been different. Maybe they would have said, okay, because I know I've been talking about that. You say, okay, look, we're gonna take it easy. We're going to ramp up. We're going to go slow. It's going to be a process, but we're going to get there. Now, with all of these other things happening and the rest of the East getting so good, you say, well, enough of that. No, we're going after it day one. We want to come out. We want to beat Philly on opening night. We want to go on a little bit of a run. We don't want to sit there and go 5-5 and have people say, oh, the Ime stuff. I guess it was Ime. And I think that's got to be a motivating factor. That has to be a motivating factor. As a player, if you come out, and they may not think of it this way, but I don't know, it has to enter their minds at some point, because they are very conscious of the media. If they come out and go 2-10 to start the season, that the questions are going to come in and the criticisms are going to come in. They're going to say, wow, I know they don't have Rob, but wow, Ime was so important. These guys are screwed. You don't want that. You don't want that as a player. You don't want to deal with that as a player. And the only way to not deal with that as a player is to go out there and win your games. Win the games and just put that aside. Erase Ime Udoka from the entire consciousness of Boston Celtics basketball, the product on the floor. We know that things are going to come out and there's always going to be some kind of leak. And at some point, I think Ime is going to officially resign or get fired. And there's always going to be some little thing hanging back there that on the outside, it's going to be talked about and whatever. That's just something you got to deal with. On the inside, you can erase all the Ime Udoka stuff. You can just eliminate and shut all that talk up by coming out October, November, and winning games and showing everybody that, yes, Ime as a coach helped a lot, obviously, but we're the players. We're the ones who went out there and put the ball in the bucket. We're the ones that went out there and stopped the other team. We can do it again. So that's what they got to go do. And that vocal leadership that we're seeing, that we heard about day 1, got to go day 2, day 3, day 10, day 50, day 500, which technically gets us into next season, but you get my point. Keep going out there and doing it every single day and that's hard because not everybody's going to have it every day. And that's the other part of it. When Marcus comes in, he's like, God, I feel like crap. I didn't sleep, whatever's going on. Somebody else has got to say, okay, well, maybe Jayson says, all right, I got you. Jaylen says, I got you. And Jaylen is the guy that goes out there and is really, really ramping it up and taking the mantle of vocal leader. It's going to be hard. This season's going to be hard for the Celtics. But it's also mostly in their control. The Rob injury hurts. But they can get through it. They can make it by, but they are mostly in control of how this goes. And they can make things a lot easier on Joe Mazzulla and make their own lives easier. Who is going to step up for Rob? That's one of the questions. Well, when the curtains went up at practice, we saw the first indication. Who is going to play with the starters? Talk about that in just a second. Thanks for making Locked On Celtics your first listen every day. Now make Locked On Fantasy Basketball your second listen or third listen if you've gone to the Locked On NBA. Stack them up, man. Stack them up because they are all good shows, if I may humbly say so. Now, Locked On Fantasy Basketball is an amazing show. Josh Lloyd is like the fantasy basketball god. He is the absolute biggest show on the network, without a doubt, and for good reason. I know you're getting ready for your fantasy basketball drafts. You got to make Locked On Fantasy part of your regular rotation here, your daily rotation, because Josh Lloyd will absolutely give you a leg up and help you win your league. Check it out wherever you got Locked On Celtics. You can get Locked On Fantasy Basketball. All right, let's wrap it up with a couple of things that I saw. First of all, Luke Kornet, as the curtains went up. So here's how it works. If you see any of the pictures that I put out or the video that I put out on Twitter, as practice opened, we don't get to see the whole thing. Practice starts in the morning, and then we get to go in later on in the afternoon and see the tail end, the last 15 minutes or so of practice. But we don't get to see the whole thing. But when you see the angle that I tweeted out of the video, I'm clearly up above. If you're watching on YouTube, the background here, I actually took, this is actually a slightly adjusted background from what I usually use, because I took this photo today. But if you look to this other side, to my right, to the left of the screen, down is the practice court. So up here, if you're watching on the video, you'll see the banners. But if you see, I tweeted out the picture too. The banners are behind me. And then if you look in the back, there's exercise bikes up top. And then if I move out of the way, you can see the weight room down behind me. That's below. And that weight room opens up to the court. So we in the media don't get a chance to see all of this until they raise curtains and let us through a door. When the curtains go up and we're looking around, there's 4 stations. And there's 18 guys that are healthy. There's 20 guys on the roster. 18 guys are healthy. So there's some shooting drills and kind of just offensive drills that they're doing. And off in the far corner is the starting group in green: Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, Al Horford, and Luke Kornet. And so that becomes the instant observation. Oh, it's Luke with the starters. All right, we got it. Luke with the starters. Let's run with it. Print it. It's an interesting decision. I certainly don't hate it. No one loves it though, but I understand why they would want to at least start looking at it with Luke Kornet. First of all, he's just a big dude. You don't realize how big he is. He's the biggest guy on the team. He is tall. He is a large human being. And it's great to have a guy that tall on the team, on the floor, in that defensive configuration. He is able to block shots. He is capable of blocking shots. He is capable of making passes, and he's capable of hitting jumpers on offense. So I think the theory, because there are a lot of different theories, we may see, as I've mentioned before, Mfiondu Kabengele, two-way player. We saw him in Summer League. He looked good in Summer League. Don't know how that's going to translate to the NBA, but you can say with, accuracy that his game most closely resembles Robert Williams' game. He is a rim runner. He will screen and roll and catch lobs. He will block shots. He's an athletic guy that's not going to do too much from outside, although he does try to shoot three-pointers. He doesn't shoot them well. That's one thing he does do better than Rob, though, I think. Haven't seen Rob try it, but regardless, you can say his game most closely resembles Rob's, so maybe that's a way to go. Preseason, you could see 4 different starters with those 4 regular starters. You can see Luke. You can see Kabengele. You can see Noah Vonleh. You can see Grant Williams. You can go a bunch of different routes there. You can go with Malcolm Brogdon and just everybody plays down a position and basically you make Tatum your power forward. It's all there. But I understand the concept of you take a guy who's a bit weaker individually and you put him with the collective best players. You put him with the starters because they're going to raise his game. If anybody on offense, when the Celtics are on offense, if any defender is going to double off of somebody, you're probably going to double off of Luke Kornet. So with Luke Kornet out there and teams doubling off of him, they're going to say, wait, we'll dare him to score and shoot. Well, he's going to be wide open. Maybe this chance of a bunch of wide open shots gets him shooting a little bit more consistently, gets him a little bit more confidence on the floor, and he can actually be a weapon, a catch and shoot weapon. Now, it's all theoretical. He has to go out there and do it. It sounds good in practice. I can sell that concept, and a lot of coaches will agree with that concept. Doc Rivers started Brian Scalabrine when Kevin Garnett was out because what you want to do is keep your bench intact. So you can take Malcolm Brogdon and put him in the starting lineup, or when you need to bring a dynamic individual player off the bench, you have Malcolm Brogdon there. You can keep Grant Williams there to sub in. You can keep Derek White to sub in. Now you got 3 good players that you can bring in off the bench. And even if you sub Kornet out, like, you don't have to keep him on the floor for 8-9 minutes at a time when he's starting. You can start him and pull him after 3 minutes. It doesn't mean he has to play 40 minutes a game. You can start him and still play 20, and that will be fine. But it's all up to him and how he makes use of that time that he gets with those guys. But I understand the concept. You put him on the floor and you let all the other guys raise his game. And then when you need to sub in, you can have Brogdon and these other guys playing against second units. And it just makes it a little bit more, just a little bit more powerful, a little bit more oomph off the bench, rather than bringing Kornet off the bench and subbing out Brogdon. Now your bench feels weak, and you don't want to put too much pressure on the starters. I would rather have some power off the bench that keeps the starters' minutes lower than the other way around. So I get the concept. We'll see if Luke Kornet can make that work. And who knows? I as I'm saying this, as you're hearing this through your headphones, I could be at the practice facility and saying, oh, look, it's Fiondo Kabengele with the starters today. And that could change everything. But same idea, same concept. He's not as good, and you want the other guys to raise his game. It's just a different type of game that they would be raising. So, but I guess I'm guessing that they want Luke Kornet's shooting ability out there to help spread the floor. That's my guess. We'll see how it goes. The other thing that was notable, and this is quick, Jayson Tatum working on floaters. We've seen him doing that before, but the finishing around the rim, there's just 3 levels there as you're driving. You have your pull-up mid-range, you have that in-between shot, the floater, and then finishing at the rim. You want to work on all 3 of those things. And I think the threat of the floater is something that's important to add to a guy who's trying to score in different ways when he drives. Pulling up against a retreating defense for a mid-range shot is okay. Now, I don't want Tatum backing guys down and turning into that fadeaway, falling down mid-range shot. That's a terrible shot. He's historically been terrible at that shot. But stepping into a mid-range shot, stepping into a 15-footer, that's money. That's easy money for Tatum. So that's one thing. Finishing at the rim, we've talked about that a million times. Play off 2 feet, play with some strength, finish through the contact. Hopefully he works towards doing that. The floater is something that, hey, if you've got Joel Embiid at the rim, if you're playing the Cavs and Jared Allen, Evan Mobley are in your way, a floater can really be helpful in that situation, because you're not gonna score at the rim on those 2 guys in the same way you're gonna score on the rim against a lesser defense, a smaller defense. So I'm curious to see exactly how Tatum unveils that. We could see Sunday in the first preseason game, Tatum really start trying to use that floater and maybe perfect that floater and see if he can start getting that off a little bit more consistently and making it more consistently. Because if he's making that, then a defense has to step up, and all he has to do as he's driving is a little fake, just kind of make it seem like I'm going for that floater, but then rip through and finish at the rim. So it's all part of the just broadening of the game, and he has to perfect that stuff. He has to finish in the paint, in the rim, at the rim, and he has to make those consistently. If he's going to lead this team and be an MVP candidate, that type of stuff has to be part of his repertoire. Day 2 of practice is on Wednesday. So I will be there. Same drill, same idea. Follow me on Twitter at John_Karalis, where I tweet things out, and occasionally a typo burns me, but I had a good one that's making the rounds. I think it qualifies as viral at this point. So yeah, follow me on Twitter. I will tweet out pictures, and I will tweet out updates. Follow my work on Boston Sports Journal, because I will be writing up full reports of everything, not just the stuff that I tweet, but full reports there. And obviously, I will have much more context and much more to say at the end of the day when I record this podcast. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You want the inside scoop? I'm there on the floor. I'm around this team every day, and I will give you everything from an inside perspective. So subscribe. Please watch the show on YouTube if you can. That's awesome. I love that more people are doing it. We're up right around 8,000 subscribers. Love that. Love it. Now that the season is starting back up, we're starting to see the uptick in subscribers. If you haven't subscribed there, please do. And if you're on that YouTube page, feed the algorithm, man. Comments would be great. Any kind of comment, a thank you, a hello, a waving, any kind of comment really helps. Ring the bell so you get notified when I drop a show, because I do drop the shows on YouTube early. The podcast version, the audio version, drops at midnight every day, or later, definitely later for games. When the season comes around, games are going to be, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. So please be aware of that. But the YouTube, whenever the YouTube show is ready, if it's ready at 10 o'clock, I post it at 10 o'clock. The show, the podcast will post at midnight. I think most people are listening to that on their way to work, but West Coasters, whatever, around the world, you listen at different times. But the YouTube show is going to be up a little bit early. So if you want it early, that's where you're going to find it first. I would love it if you shared the podcast. Tell your friends, tell everybody they should be listening to and watching the Locked On Celtics podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.